So today Tony's going to be doing the CV boots on his, what is it, 05?
Yep.
Arctic Cat 400. See, he's already got the back wheels off. Working on getting the entire hub assembly off.
Never done one on a 4x4 quad before. I've done them on front wheel drive cars, so this is going to be a new adventure. Time for a new battery.
So we have to take the upper and lower A-arms off in order to actually pull the axle out of the rear end.
Had to break out some heavy artillery.
Got to take the castle nut off.
Yep. Now these things are usually torqued on pretty good, so sometimes you got to give them a good whack. You might break your ratchet.
A breaker bar would come in handy at this point.
Yes, it would. And that's probably what I'm going to end up getting. The reason I don't like using a breaker bar is 9 out of 10 times you either over tighten something, which is not a good thing. And we did it anyway. We broke this off.
So once we get the castle nut off, we'll actually be able to pull that whole the whole hub assembly off, leaving us with just the axle to pull out of the rear end, so we can replace both the inner and outer CV boots. The lubrication to help it out.
Oh yeah. Cocoa lube, that stuff works great. Yeah, these guys got these things on a little tighter than what they should be.
If at first you don't succeed, get a bigger hammer.
You know the race car theory. If it doesn't work, get a hammer. If it still don't work, get a bigger hammer. And I don't think that's going to work.
What about using a pipe for leverage on the breaker bar?
The tranny's actually turning, so it's not going to do anything.
Okay.
Although I do have
Would it help if I held the brakes?
you could try, but there really isn't any brake shoes on that side. There are a little bit, but if you want to grab them, maybe it will work. I have no idea. The brake shoes, see what happens. Okay.
There you go.
Now there's more ways than one to skin a cat.
Sometimes you have to put it in gear.
Sometimes you just have to be brutal with it.
These machines tend to really like being beaten up.
Oh yeah. Especially for the maintenance that they didn't take care of. Okay. It's usually a good practice that if you're tearing a quad apart or a car or anything, if there's any kind of nuts, bolts that you need to take out, put in anytime, multiple times, considering this is a castle nut where you actually stick a cotter pin through it to lock it in place so that way it doesn't come off. It's always a good practice to put anti-seize on the threads. That way, next time you need to do something like this, you're not going to have this kind of a problem. Unfortunately, I don't know who it was that serviced it or maintained it, but it didn't seem like it was maintained very well. So we'll take care of all that as we've been building it. So just one more thing you like to take care of as you go.
These are the A-arms. And the hub comes right off.
And that's your hub. Let me just put all that together. We'll pack some grease on that. Let's see if we can get this puppy out of here.
So in theory, it should just
I've already pre-loosened all the nuts and bolts for the shocks. But if you pre-do your shocks, you should be able to pull your shock out, and that'll allow your lower A-arm to drop completely out of the way. That'll also allow you to get the shock out of the way, so that way you're not busting your knuckles when you start really yanking and pulling on that crazy thing. So that way we don't have any issues. Now, this isn't an easy thing to do, but sometimes there are easier ways to do it, and we're going to find out if we need to do it the hard way or the easy way.
It is nothing serious.
I think we're going to end up having to do it the hard way. So,
it was a theory that it should just pull right out. That doesn't always mean that it's just going to slide right out on you. Or, well, if it just slid right out, that'd be a terrible thing.
I've done this trick before on front-wheel drive cars with the transaxles, which is basically the same thing. There's just this little retaining clip, just a piece of wire wrapped around on the inside, and when you bang it, it's supposed to shrink in, pop, and release. Sometimes they don't cooperate, so you got to get a little ingenuity going. Yeah, you got to get a little creative. So, what I have found out is if you take two flathead screwdrivers and you actually stick them behind the hub, a lot of times you give them a good pop, and it'll a little more pressure, they'll pop them out. The only thing you got to watch is on a car, it's a sealed unit, and there's spacing designed for an actual transaxle puller, which is like a fork that goes in behind the transaxle. It's got a dent puller on the other end of it. You slide this big old heavy weight, bang, it pops them right out. But on this, we're going to try two screwdrivers if we can get them in there somehow, and see if we can get it to pop that way. I don't know if it's going to work, but we'll find out. Be careful so you don't ruin anything or bend anything you don't want to bend. And there's no place to put them. So,
You have a bungee cord to tie up that upper A-arm.
yeah.
But, you tie up the upper A-arm, your lower A-arm drops all the way down. You can tie up that upper A-arm, it doesn't get in your way as much. brakes are on too.
We may have to do this. We got, I got some CV boots and some grease packs. They're a nice company. They make some really nice CV boots. And
Good.
that's what we're gonna do today. That's real bad, huh? Lovely.
Those clips are not the easiest thing to get off.
No, they are not. They're usually a really pain in the ass, and you gotta really bust your chops to do it. If you can get a little screwdriver in there and crank down and that's the easiest way to get them off. If you get a pair of wire cutters in there without getting yourself, a lot of times you can flip them and peel them off, but you got to get an edge up first. So a little bit of a hassle, but be patient. Peel them off just like that. What I'm looking for is there's usually an odd tooth inside your hub that goes on, and that's what I'm actually looking for. So that way we don't have any problems.
There's one CV boot.
Yep, that's the one. I'll get the other one. Let me get a rag. We'll clean everything up. It's always good to clean everything down. Use a rag, but make sure it's a clean rag. You don't want any metal shavings, wood shavings, anything like that. That's gonna really play havoc on your CV joints. But so it's always good to wipe them all down. Make sure we're good. It's always nice to wear a pair of rubber gloves too. That kind of keeps you clean. Keeps contaminants out, and the other thing is kind of saves you a little bit if there's any sharp burrs or anything, so you don't bleed into the project. Okay, these are our CV boots. Stick them all together. You want to check, make sure that there's inners and outers, or if it's all the same, which they look like they're all the same diameter. T23s. What I'm looking at is right here, usually on your CV boot, on the lip, there's usually markings, numbers that they'll tell you what's what. These boots are actually BT-23s by Inner Parts, which I found is a half decent company. They really do make a nice part, and the price is reasonable too. And they send you everything. They send you the clips, the boots, the grease, literally everything you can think of. They send to you, so that way you have everything. Just looking for the right ones for where they go. And then we're just going to cut the grease bag open here. And we're going to fill this CV boot somewhat with grease. Now you don't want to like completely fill it, because you'll block the hole, and then when you push it on the shaft, you'll actually clean everything out of it. So what you want to do is you kind of want to put a big blob in there, slide it around to the outside edge, just so everything's packed in there really nice like we're doing, just to keep everything a little on the cleaner side, so that way when you push it on, you don't lose it completely out of everything. So we just kind of smear it around down in there like a cone. Yeah, we're going to slip that baby right on there. Now, if you look on your drive shaft, you'll know when you have the boot on in the right location, because as your axle travels, let me clean up here a little bit and then I'll show you what you want to watch out for. If you take a new boot, you're going to notice that it's an accordion shape, and you just slide your boot on, you clamp this end, and it's stretched like that. What's going to happen is when your axle goes to choke up and down with your suspension, so it does this, you're actually going to end up tearing your boot sooner or later. So when you slide it on, you get this lip in the back into the right location. You actually want to slide this piece in so it accordions in. You'll know when you have it right, because if you actually look, there's a little indentation right here on the drive shaft that snaps into like that, so when you pinch your band around it, it'll lock in place. So it'll actually, the outer boot will actually look like that. That way when you put the band around here and pinch it and tighten it up, it'll actually squeeze into that little indentation right there. So that way it can't slide off, it can't slide on. And then that way as your axle actually pivots, you have the right amount of play in your boots so you don't prematurely tear them and wear them out. So that's kind of what I was looking for. Now these are pinch rings. Actually grab them with a pair of wire cutters. They say no tools, no special tools needed. If you actually take a pair of wire cutters, grab a hold of that, like so, and you can squeeze them, you'll actually crush this together, and that'll actually put pressure on the ring and tighten the rings up. Fortunately, I do quite a bit of plumbing, so I actually have some specialty tools for crimp rings that I could actually use. So we're actually going to use the specialty tool for that. I just want to get my band in place. Kind of seems like the wrong size band for here, but we could always fix that because they pop apart. There's actually little holes in here, there's little teeth in here, and as you slide this through, like so, that little tongue actually grabs a hold right through one of the little holes, and that's how you could adjust your bands. So we're going to make sure we have the right spacing on it, and we're going to get that on. There we go. Now you could use your wire cutters to crimp down on that little spot right there and tighten them up. I'm not going to tighten anything up yet because I want to make sure everything's in the right location and everything is fine grease wise and stuff. And usually it's the last thing that I want to do is actually tighten up all the bands, is just because I want to make sure everything's on and correct. This one's going to drive me a little nuts. There we go. It's going to be stubborn. More stubborn than what I thought. I think because my hands are all greasy and stubborn. Now, for the outside. Now this actually has a retaining ring on it. If you look, same thing as the inside, it actually has this little retaining clip here that they snap in, snap out type thing. You want to make sure that it's all there, that it's in good shape. That's one of the other things that's a little bit of a pain in the butt to get working on. Unfortunately, the outside one popped, the inside one didn't. we were hoping for the other way, but that's all right, because we're going to do it like this then. We're going to put our boot on, make sure everything's right, and then we're going to pack this one full of grease too. want to constantly clean your hands. It's just be safe to get contaminants in there. Any kind of little dirt particles or anything like that will chew the wheel bearings to smithereens. So now you got to make sure your little retaining clip is there. You want to get your teeth lined up. You're gonna take a hammer, give it a pop, and it locks right back on, and you're good. Just check it, make sure that you have all the play for a swivel, make sure all your bearings are good, make sure nothing pops out, and then you just want to pull your boot forward here, get that on the outside of the hub. And make sure that's pulled down where it needs to be. And that is in place. Now I know you're probably thinking, well, you didn't put the other clip on. And you're wondering what's going on. I slid that clip up there and clipped it on. Well, you don't really, depending on your clips, you don't really need to do that all the time, just for the fact that the clips that we have, you could actually push them and they unlock. So you could take them, you could open them up, and you could wrap them around your axle, like so. So we really didn't need to do that. It was just easier, because sometimes you got to fight with them to get them to pop back together again. So I found out that it's just easier to slide them up there for the most part, unless you have to. And now I'm going to have to fight with this one to get it the right way. Unfortunately, the clip keeps sliding. I'm having a hard time trying to hold it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use what they call a pick tool, where a little teeth pop through here and actually hook onto the teeth. I'm going to cheat a little bit and try to use a pick tool. Like that. There we go. That one's on.
Sometimes you just have to use multiple tools till you get it on there.
Yep, you gotta work at it. It's not easy. It's not meant to be easy. It's meant to stay on there and hold your grease in and your hooks in place. So sometimes you gotta work at it. It's just the way it is. And then other times you get lucky and take up real easy. So.
Like that particular outer ring, snapped right together. No problem.
Yes. Now, what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to take your vice grips or your channel locks or whatever you're using. Most people use wire cutters, and they grab that piece right there and they just squeeze the daylights out of it as tight as you can. And that's why you don't need any specialty tools, they say, for this. Fortunately, I'm kind of one of the fortunate ones. I do a bunch of plumbing, so I actually have specialty tools like this. It's for doing PEX. It's actually a ratchet clamp. For doing PEX plumbing, it's the same type of snap rings. So instead of me trying to get in there with a pair of wire cutters and squeeze and be real gentle so I don't crush the wrong things or cut through the boot, I could just do that. The jaw's open. You could actually take that nut and that goes right inside there, and then when you crank down on the handle, it pulls the living daylights out of them and clamps them down. So I could actually do this, and we're done. So don't go buying the tool. Ask one of your buddies to see if they have one, because these crazy things are expensive. They're about 80 bucks, and I don't expect anybody to actually own one of those. So unless you do a lot of PEX plumbing. So, but for me, I'm fortunate. I'm just checking to make sure my rubber boot's on all the way before I clamp down on that crazy thing and find out that it's not. So we're done. One side complete, and then we could put all of our junk back together again. Now, like most guys, we get into doing things, don't pay a whole lot of attention to the little fine details on things, and we like to just grab tools and start tearing things apart. And most people probably edit it out. I'm hoping my buddy here, Will, that's filming all this for you guys, won't edit this out, because I kind of want this to be a learning experience along with a training video. If you actually look at your wheel bearing hub, you have a skinnier section, you have a wider section. This is where it mounts to. You can mount it either way, up or down, but neither way is right. It's got to go a certain way, and when I took it apart, I didn't actually pay attention. I'm not real familiar with Articats. I'm more of a Suzuki person, but on a wing and a prayer, I bought this and decided to turn this into the beast. So I actually have to go over on the other side and take a look at if the smaller section goes down bottom or if it goes up top. So that's what we're going to need to do. We're going to take a walk over here, and hey, lo and behold, it's the skinnier section up top. So we'll come back over here, and we'll take a little grease from anywhere you want. We got enough laying around here. I just want to take and I want to grease the back of that little wheel bearing right there. Throw a little grease on it just to make sure everything's really nice and clean. And then we can slide that on like that, like so. My other rag, like I said, keep making sure your hands are clean. You don't want to pick up any kind of dirt, grass, even in your garage. If there's dirt on the floor, you don't want to pick that up and stick that in where the wheel bearings go. It'll make a mess of things. So once I have that, I'm going to disconnect the bungee cord here for the upper A-arms. I'm going to take this, I'm going to pull this back, I'm going to slide that in there, but before I do, I want to get a little more grease. We have some grease packets. Now what I want to do is, squeaks drive me crazy. I don't know about you, but I'm just going to take a little grease here, and I'm going to smear it on the sides of where my bearings and my hub mount to. They're a little rubber piece, and they will squeak like crazy. And considering we go out and play in the mud, I would rather have it a little more reliable. So we're going to do it that way. I'm going to put that in, slide that up, slide that through, get the excess off. Put a little grease around that. Well, lo and behold, I think my jack went down. We're not going to crank down on them, but we are going to put the nuts on just to hold them in place. Then your hub goes on, and then your castle nut. Now, depending on what ATV you have, it's basically all the same process. There really isn't a whole lot of difference from one to another. The only thing you're going to find out that there is a difference on, and you want to pay attention to that, is actually the torque on your castle nut. They usually tell you torque it on with a torque wrench at a certain amount of pounds, which is around here somewhere. Will found it. I'll show you what it looks like. Now there's a couple of different ways to cheat. Now this is a torque wrench. It's got a little dial handle, and if you look down the handle, there's increments on feet and inches. So what you want to do is you kind of want to loosen up the torque wrench here. You can spin that up to what it's supposed to be. You tighten it down. Then when you start cranking on it, it'll actually click to let you know that you're at the right poundage. That's what you want to do. What I do is something a little different. I'm kind of used to working on cars, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to run this in tight. I know what my impact gun is. My little DeWalt impact gun thing. It's not running it in all the way, so we will pull it apart and we'll use a breaker bar. But me, I like to tighten them up to a certain strength. And find my wrench here. Once I get my poundage, I check my back spacing, make sure that's all good, make sure everything pivots fine. I got some good pivot on everything. Nothing's binding. And then I could actually take and put my cotter pin back through. Gotta find the hole.
You do have to line up the holes for the cotter pin.
Yeah, you do. And if you don't, you're gonna have a headache like I'm having. I'm just off just a little bit, it seems. So that's why they do have a hole. I'm just having a little bit of a hard time trying to see the hole. There we go. Once you get the cotter pin through, there's two legs on it. You just want to grab your one leg and flip that up and around. And then you can just give it a little tap, flatten it out up against the hub. Your other one you want to grab, bend it in towards the hub. So that way it kind of flares out, doesn't allow your nut to spin off. Bottom mounts, slides on, everything's good with that. I want to do a little greasing just to make sure that they don't squeak. So I'm just going to take a little grease, squeeze it out of the packet. I'm going to put it on and I'm going to grease the living daylights out of the little bushing that holds the shock in place. Like I said, little grease helps. Doesn't hurt anything. Get that all cleaned up. But we're going to slip this baby on here. Get it up in place. Bottom on this one is actually a bolt with a big washer. We're going to thread that one in here. Some of them have where it's actually a bolt that goes through it. Some of them have this where it's a bolt that slides into a pin. Whatever style you have, you know, they're all a little different depending on your manufacturer. Doesn't really matter if they all mount the same way. So we're going to put these bushings back in for right now, and hopefully they'll hold for a little bit until the new ones come in, and then we'll show you how that works. Once you have your shock in place, you want to lift that up, get your hole in place. You can slide that in there like that, and then you put your nut back on. Tighten everything up. You want to double check everything, make sure everything's right. What I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to take all these little nut fittings and stuff. Like I said, most people don't do it, and it drives me crazy. If I ever need to remove this hub again in the future because of the type of riding we do, we go out and we play in the mud, we play in the water, all that kind of contaminants get in there and they wear parts out. And if I'd ever need to replace my hub bearings or anything, then I'm going to end up fighting with all this again like we did the first time to get it all apart. And instead of doing that, if you take a little if you take a little what they call anti-seize, most guys, mechanics put them on lug nuts. Take a little anti-seize, put them on. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So you get anti-seize in a couple different forms. I like it in a little tube. It's probably $4 or $5 for one. They also make it in a big can with a dipper that you pull out and has a little brush on the end of it. I don't care so much for those because they're kind of messy. What I found, what I like is with the tube, it's kind of like a toothpaste tube. You can just take it, open it up, and you just squeeze a little out and you rub it on the side of the threads. You don't have to coat the whole entire thread. You just need to put a dab on, and then when you stick your nut on and you start to thread it, what anti-seize is going to do is it's for what they call galling. It's when you have two different types of metal going together. It stops it from chemically reacting, like metal to aluminum hubs. It stops them from corroding and blocking themselves in place like rust. Anti-seize works really good on metal bolts and metal nuts, just for the fact that it has that anti-galling effect. It doesn't allow the nut and the bolt to rust together. So that's why I like using it on all these parts, because of going out in the water and the mud and everything else, they're going to rust. No matter what you do, they're going to rust. I don't care if you go out and play in the mud and then you come home and wash your quad, you're washing it with water. And unless you actually blow dry your quad clean, which I don't know anybody that does that, you're going to have rust. So putting anti-seize on the threads, you're better off. And like I said, you just dab a little on, you thread it on, and then, for instance, like this, I dabbed it in one spot, you thread your nut on, and then if you actually take a look, when you thread your nut on, it'll actually push that through all the threads on the bolt, so that way you don't have any seizing problems. Then you're way ahead of the game. Then what you do is you get your two sockets, which belong to each one. We're going to cheat a little bit. We're going to use an impact gun on the crazy thing. We're going to stick the impact gun in here. I'm going to stick my ratchet on the other side and set it for tight. And we're going to run that up one like that. Use your bottom. Now my impact gun goes up to about 320 pounds of torque per foot. So when I ran it on, I run it until it semi-stopped. If you run it on until that thing stops, you may snap the bolts off. So what I do is you run it on when it gets a little tight. Then what you want to do is you want to check, make sure everything's moving. If you really want to check, you can always take your shock off, and then you can really make sure everything is tight. Comes down on its own. You know you got some pretty good pressure on it, but not enough where it'll loosen itself up. So we'll just push this all back together again.